And he said this visitation, this meeting, stopped his ability to repeat his mantra. And he said this, for someone who was such an ardent, passionate Krishna Bhakta, this was a great disaster. He said, I could no longer think about Krishna, I couldn't repeat his name, and I felt I'd slid down from my high state, that I was failing in my practice, so I was very worried. He said, I went all over Chennai talking to all the big swamis I could find, Ramakrishna Mission people, people who were quite famous at the time, and they all said, you know, dark night of the soul, don't give up, keep trying. He said they had standard pat book answers they'd read in their books. This is what you do when you find your devotion slacking off. So they gave standard book answers. He said none of these people had a direct experience, so they couldn't look at my state, evaluate my state, and give me a proper answer. And then I thought, there's one person in the world who can tell me what's really going on. It's that Swami in Tiruvannamalai. I had a great experience with him. He was a big Krishna Bhakta. I'll go and tell my story to him, and then he can give me good advice. So the next weekend he got on the train, got to Tiruvannamalai, came by a cart to the ashram. Again, it was lunchtime, and the attendant tried to shoo him out, and Bhagavan said, no, let him in. He could see that this man was burning in a way for God. And Papaji told the whole story, and Bhagavan said, how did you get here today? And Papaji said, well, I came on the train. And then he said, and what happened when you got off the train? And Papaji said, I got into a bullock cart, came to the ashram. And then what happened? He said, well, I got off the bullock cart, walked in here and prostrated. And then Bhagavan paused for a while, and he said, in the same way that those conveyances took you to your destination, and here you are presenting yourself to me, your japa took you to your destination, you have arrived, you have arrived, you have arrived. And he said, in that moment, I reconnected with the self I really was. I understood that this passionate japa had in fact been a distraction, very pleasant, but nonetheless a distraction. He said, when I was a small boy, 6-year-old, I had a direct experience of the self. I didn't know what it was. When I came out of that experience, my mother, who was an ardent Krishna Bhakta, persuaded me that I'd actually had a vision of Krishna, and if I wanted to get it back, I should worship Krishna, which is what I did, and that's when the form of Krishna started appearing. But he said, I realized in Bhagavan's presence that this experience, which I had had when I was 6, was actually the full, complete experience of the self, and that in a way I had hidden it up with this lifelong quest to externalize the state into a quest for a physical form of God who could give me bliss, who could give me peace. So he said, I spent 25 years after that initial experience of the self looking outside of myself for a form of God who would give me bliss, peace and happiness. And what Bhagavan did for me was he made me realize that peace, bliss and happiness were inherent in me as my own self, and that I no longer needed to look. But he said, I was misdirected by my mother when I was 8 into external worship of a form that gave me bliss, peace and happiness. And it was Ramaana Maharshi who took me back into the self, who showed me my own self, who showed me that there is nothing external to the self, and that there is nothing apart from the self that can give you any happiness greater than or different from the bliss of the self. He said that's the role of the true guru. He said all these amateurs in Madras, they were well-meaning, they'd read all the books, they'd read all the scriptures, but they didn't have the experience, and they didn't have the ability to look into my heart and see that my business was finished, that I no longer needed to chant the name of God, because that had worn down my jiva to the point where there was nothing left except self. He said it took a guru of the magnitude of Bhagavan who could immediately look at me and see that my sadhana was finished, to say with authority, you have arrived, And by saying that, with the power and authority of the self, he put me in that state and established me there with such force and authority, I never needed to look outside of it again for anything else.